I used to be paralyzed by fear until I found this simple prayer. Let me share it with you. Fear. It's something we all experience, yet we often keep it hidden, letting it rule our thoughts and limit our lives. Imagine carrying that burden every day, feeling powerless to change it. That was me, held back by anxieties that seemed impossible to conquer. But then, I discovered a prayer so simple yet transformative, it changed my whole outlook. It wasn't about instantly erasing my fear, but learning to live above it, step by step, with God's help. Now, this isn't a typical prayer you might say in a routine. It's an invitation to let go and let God. If you're someone who's felt the weight of fear, who's tired of facing it alone, then this prayer could be the turning point you've been looking for. What if there was a way to surrender those fears and experience true peace, no matter what's going on around you? Let's explore this journey together, diving deep into how this prayer of surrender helped me overcome my greatest fear and how it can do the same for you. Fear. It's a word that grips many of us in ways we can't always describe. For some, it's the fear of failure, of letting down those they care about. For others, it's the fear of rejection or loneliness. And for many, it's the fear of loss. Fear has this unique way of creeping into our lives, doesn't it? It stirs in our minds, fills our hearts, and before we know it, we're caught up in it, our actions limited by this invisible force. Some say fear keeps us safe, but when it becomes a constant companion, it starts to chip away at the freedom God intended for us to live with. Now, think about how fear actually impacts us. Ever noticed how it changes your whole body? Your shoulders tense up, your breathing becomes shallow, and suddenly everything feels heavy. That's fear working its way from your mind into your very being. It's interesting, isn't it, how something so abstract can have such a real effect on our bodies. It's a subtle reminder that we're not only physical beings but also deeply spiritual ones. Our minds and hearts are so interconnected, and when one is in distress, the other feels it too. But here's the thing about fear. It's rooted in anticipation of what could happen, rather than what's happening right now. We imagine worst-case scenarios and let them paralyze us, even if reality doesn't reflect those fears at all. Just think about the things you've been afraid of that never actually came to pass. For many of us, our fears are like shadows. They seem bigger in the dark, but when we shine light on them, they shrink away. This realization itself is empowering. It's the first step to understanding that fear isn't as immovable as it feels. What if there was a way to challenge these fears? Maybe not to erase them completely, but to face them with courage. Many have found strength in prayer, turning to God with their deepest anxieties. By doing this, they invite His presence into their struggles. There's a power in speaking your fears out loud, offering them up to God, and trusting that He can handle them. Imagine taking that leap. Instead of fighting fear alone, you have God by your side, helping you see beyond what you can't control. And that, my friend, is where the journey truly begins. The prayer that transformed my life was surprisingly simple, yet incredibly profound. It's called the prayer of surrender, and at its core, it's about releasing control and placing everything in God's hands. Now you may think, but I already pray. Why is this different? Well, it's not just about asking for help. It's about letting go of our need to control every outcome, every possibility. In this prayer, you're not just speaking words. You're handing over the very things that keep you up at night. It's a humble act, but one that brings immense peace. When I first started praying this way, it felt odd, almost uncomfortable. I was so used to praying for specific outcomes that it felt like I wasn't doing enough by just surrendering. But here's where the beauty lies. Surrendering isn't about giving up. It's about giving over. You're saying to God, I trust you with this. I believe that you know better than I do. It's in this vulnerability that we find strength because we're no longer carrying the burden alone. We're inviting God into our struggle, and that changes everything. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine the thing you're most worried about right now. Maybe it's something with work, or maybe it's a family situation. Close your eyes, hold that worry in your mind, and simply say, Lord, I surrender this to you. I don't have the answers, but I trust that you do. Then let it go. Easier said than done, right? But that's the beauty of this prayer. It doesn't require you to be perfect at it. It's a practice, a daily commitment to trust. Over time, this prayer becomes more than just words. It becomes a mindset. You start to feel a weight lift, little by little, as you get used to releasing your worries. You might even find that things you were terrified of suddenly don't have the same power over you. And that's because the fear loses its grip when we're anchored in faith rather than anxiety. You'll discover that true freedom doesn't come from control. It comes from surrender. At first, I didn't see any instant changes. I'd pray, surrendering my fear, but still felt that familiar anxiety creeping back. But the prayer was working in subtle ways, reshaping how I faced each day. When I prayed, "Lord, I surrender this fear to you," it started to become a habit of my heart, not just a one-time solution. Each time a worry arose, I'd remember those words and feel just a little stronger. This repetition built a quiet resilience, a growing trust that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to bear everything alone. One day, I had a breakthrough moment. It was a situation I normally would have obsessed over, replaying scenarios in my mind. But this time, after praying, I felt a peace I hadn't felt before. It was like I could breathe deeper, think clearer. I realized this wasn't about God magically erasing my fear. It was about Him teaching me to navigate it differently. It's like learning to walk on water. You're still aware of the waves, but you're focused on something greater. Over time, this shifted my whole perspective. Another beautiful aspect of this prayer is that it softened my expectations. Before, I'd pray with a tight grip on what I wanted the answer to be. But through surrender, I learned to approach God with open hands, willing to accept whatever He deemed best. This wasn't easy at first. There were days I'd slip back into old habits of control. Yet, each time I returned to that prayer, it became easier to let go. It's a process, one that doesn't demand perfection, only patience. Gradually, the fears that once paralyzed me began to lose their power. That's not to say they disappeared entirely. I'm human after all. But instead of allowing them to dominate my life, I'd bring them to prayer, and each time, they'd shrink a little more. It's like God was reminding me, "You're not alone in this. I'm right here, walking with you." This journey turned fear from a giant in my life into something small, something manageable. And that, to me, was a miracle. Now, here's where this journey becomes more than just a personal story. It's an invitation. This prayer isn't something special only a few can access. It's available to anyone willing to open their heart and surrender their fears. Think of it like reaching out for a lifeline that's always been there, waiting for you to grab hold. I'm convinced that if more people embrace this kind of prayer, the weight of their worries could start to lift too. Fear thrives in isolation, but in prayer, you're inviting God to be right there with you in the struggle. For anyone facing fear, I encourage you to try this simple prayer of surrender, especially in those moments when anxiety hits hardest. It doesn't need to be elaborate or wordy. In fact, some of the most powerful prayers are the shortest, spoken right in the midst of our worries. Just saying, "Lord, I surrender this to you," can create a ripple effect in your heart. It's an act of humility, acknowledging that we can't do it all on our own, and we were never meant to. Another wonderful part of this prayer practice is that it builds a habit of faith. Just like we form habits of brushing our teeth or checking our phones, we can create a habit of turning to God in moments of fear. Imagine the peace that could bring to our daily lives. You might start to feel lighter, more resilient, and find that situations that once terrified you now feel less daunting. This prayer plants a seed of courage that grows each time you surrender. The beauty of surrender is that it doesn't require perfection, only a willingness to trust God a little more each day. So, if fear has been holding you back, I invite you to try this prayer. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Start now in whatever small way you can. You might just find that, like me, you begin to see fear in a whole new light, as something you can live with, manage, and ultimately overcome. So here's the question. What's holding you back from trying this prayer? Imagine the difference it could make if, the next time fear sneaks in, you simply let it go into God's hands. When we embrace this prayer of surrender, we're making a choice to trust, to let God guide us through our anxieties and doubts. It's more than just a few words. It's a mindset shift, a daily reminder that we're not facing these battles alone. Maybe you're ready to take that step, or maybe you still have doubts. Either way, what would it mean to bring God into your struggles fully? This prayer can be a powerful way to strengthen your faith journey, especially if you're seeking peace in a world that often feels anything but peaceful. Ready to take your faith journey to the next level? Get your copy of the yearly prayer and reflection journal today and experience the power of daily prayer, reflection, and spiritual growth. Whether you're seeking a deeper connection with God, looking for guidance, or simply need a source of encouragement, this journal is your perfect companion. Don't wait. Start your transformative journey now and let God's Word shape your life one day at a time. Click the link in the comments and begin living a more purposeful, faith-filled year. And don't forget to subscribe to Proverbius and turn on notifications so you won't miss more content to inspire and deepen your walk in faith. Let's keep growing together.